So as you can see in your program, the panel is titled, In Their Own Words, What Keeps Us Awake at Night, which certainly speaks to the challenges faced by these caregivers. Throughout the next hour, these caregivers of all eras, all relationships and injuries and illnesses will set the stage for this afternoon's exploration into the future of caregiving. They will tell you, based on real-life experience, what they are concerned about for the future. And later today, we'll explore how we can ease those concerns. And to lead the conversation and to introduce our panelists, please welcome Rachel O'Hearn, a caregiver herself and a board member at the Quality of Life Foundation. Rachel?
Thank you. All right, thank you for that introduction, and thank you all for coming to this event today. This is extraordinary and unprecedented. Thank you, Senator Dole, VA, I think Secretary Bob has left, to have such attention and such a large podium just for caregivers, so that's very exciting. I'd like to introduce everyone who's joining me on the stage, then I've got a few comments, and then we will dive right into our discussion. So we have, and y'all switched order on me, so we'll start with Roxana Delgado from the great state of Texas, Annie Remsburg from Arizona, Jason Corneen from Massachusetts, and Mary Ward from North Carolina. So yes, absolutely, big hand for y'all. They have extremely compelling stories. They have a varied point of view, and I will get through my stuff quickly so we can get to that. In caregiver life, just like civilian life, every experience is unique. Every story is different. But I'm going to guess that everyone here on the stage and many of the fellows in the room have one shared experience, and that's when you realized that you were a caregiver and everything was changing and different. And for me, that was actually not when I got the phone call that my husband had been seriously injured and had lost 3 limbs while conducting a dismounted patrol in Afghanistan with the 101st Airborne. It was not when I flew to Germany to see him. It was not sitting in a little ICU room there with him. It was not. I was the only civilian on a C-17. Army people, I don't actually know. Yes, thank you. Some giant airplane. And it was in the ICU in San Antonio, Texas. We ended up in Brooke Army Medical Center, our home of record is Texas, and that was phenomenal. When he looked up at me, National Merit Scholar, perfect SAT score, top 10% at West Point, and says, "Hey Rach, I don't really understand all that's going on. These drugs are pretty intense, so I'm gonna need you to make the decisions for a while." And I'm like, okay, this is good. So I'm an undergrad in political science, just got accepted to an MSW program. I learned what a platoon was about a year ago. No doubt, I can get trauma surgery by lunch, right? This is all good. You know, and the choice at that time, he had about 7 inches of femur left on one side, and it looked like he had an infection. And we had to decide whether to pull it and treat the infection or give him a chance, which would leave the limb, which would likely not allow him to walk. So that was kind of a lot at 24, married about a year and a half. But I had so much support, and that's thanks to a lot of the people in this room. We were legally married. I had a current power of attorney. My family was there. I think we landed about midnight in San Antonio on a Friday. My parents were there by, oh Lord, who knows, 6, 7 a.m. Saturday, I'm sure. My in-laws are retired Army. They had ID cards. They could come and go from the annex. They could go to the PX if someone needed anything. Not to mention the community of San Antonio, TSGLI, that Wounded Warrior Project brought about, Federal Recovery Coordinator Program, Linda Davis, you're here somewhere, would come into play way long down the road. But I know that I had those things because the people who came before me did these events, and they did this hard work, and they put in the time to identify the problems and create long-term innovative solutions to pave that way for me. So thank you for that. Hopefully we can do some of that today for those that will follow, and as we look to the long term. Our goal today with this panel is to look to long-term solutions, whether that's delayed onset traumatic brain injuries that may or may not have presented. Do we have the right support structures in place for those things? What does our contingency care planning look like, both for aging parents and for new spouses? We've got great caregivers, so So I'll let y'all start to introduce yourselves. We can go this way, and then we will start our discussion.
Well, my name is Mary Ward, and my husband and I have been married for 36 years. I've been his caregiver for 23 of the 36 years. In 1993, he contracted encephalitis, and as a result of that has significant cognitive impairment. It's non-service related. And in 2010, he was diagnosed with service-connected amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, also known as ALS.
For those of you I hadn't had the pleasure to meet yet, my name's Jason Corneen. I'm the Dole Fellow from Massachusetts. I appreciate Senator Dole giving someone like me and my family an opportunity to have a platform. I'm a Coast Guard husband, not a lot of them out there. Google support groups for Coast Guard husbands. It doesn't go very far. I have the privilege and honor to be married to the strongest, most beautiful woman I've ever known. She was injured in 1999 when she was active duty in the Coast Guard. And we dealt with, it's been a long journey. It's been 16 years. We're raising 2 beautiful children together and navigating the path. We've had an opportunity to see a really powerful shift in the VA over the last 16 years. And it makes us very hopeful for our future, for our children's future. But there are still concerns that we have. And I appreciate the Senator for getting this started. And I also appreciate the VA for being willing to listen. I think that we could talk, but if no one's listening, it's not going to go anywhere. So, thanks.
You made me upset.
That's what I do.
Hi, my name is Annie Remsburg. I am the parent and mother of Corey Remsburg. Corey is an Army Ranger who was on his 10th deployment when he was blown up by an IED explosion in Afghanistan on his 10th tour. Army Rangers do go back and forth short tours. But we basically got the word. The Army was fantastic about contacting us, letting us know what type of injuries he had. He had been blown up, had the hole in the side of his right head, had a penetrating IED explosion, burns, shrapnel to the right side, and the devastating part was that he was found face down in water and in that really terrible canal. So they were able to resuscitate him on the banks, and probably the saving grace was that they had already called the helicopters to pick them up. They were coming out of a highly successful mission, and the man in front of him died instantly. And with that said, they got my son and several others who had been injured on the helicopters and into Kandahar and Bagram for surgeries. He went from there, of course, on to Landstuhl, Germany, and it just took a very long time for them to be able to get the brain swelling down. So myself, my husband, and 3 family members traveled to Landstuhl at the Army's request. And I'm sure everyone in here, because most of you are military related in some shape or form, know that that's not a good request. Because when you are called over, it's because they cannot stabilize your loved one. But that was when I realized I'm a caregiver. It happened October 1st, 2009. We went over in force to be there for him. And I have told other caregivers this. When I first started out being a mother, it's much different than being a spouse. Not to, disregard that. But being a mother, I went over and looked at my son and realized that I really had to prepare myself for the worst, and I really prayed for the best, and I just never gave up hope. And that's been my mantra for years. So after 7 years, this was a miracle man. He didn't die as they thought he would. He came home. We were fortunate. We went to the Tampa Polytrauma Center. He got excellent care. We had a lot of support from the beginning because he was special operations. We had SOCOM, who's right down there in Florida. But there are a lot of hardships I bear as a family caregiver and as a parent because I have an age factor. I'm not nervous up here. These are essential tremors, okay? It's a condition that I can't do much about, and as I age, they get worse. I've also had a recent heart attack in 2014, yeah. So I have 2 stents in my heart, but that is not gonna hold me down. So I am still, my son's caregiver. We worked very hard to get Corey back to independence as much as possible. And I feel that the VA has really been most helpful to us. And I recognize there's a lot of frustration from caregivers with the VA. People who are not getting the care they deserve, who are not getting the care they need. And due to, I would rather call you Wonder Woman if you don't mind. Due to people like Elizabeth Dole and so many of the other nonprofits who are sitting in this room, we are finding ways to support our veterans and get the word out and make sure that we don't have homeless vets or vets that go without their needs covered. Some of the concerns I have are relative to things like Social Security on my part, loss of income, aging. I have to have contingency plans in place. My son was never married. He was injured at 26. He's only 33. And he's had some severe impact from the brain injury, which means he needs assistance. He is not going to be able to be 100% independent. And I could rattle on, but I don't want to take everybody else's time.
They made it difficult for me now.
No.
So my name is Roxana Delgado. I'm from Texas. I'm a fellow representing Texas. Very proud to be in the San Antonio area where you have the headquarters of USAA. So we're very excited about that. Anyway, I'm a kind of like an outlier, a different case. I just happen to wear 2 hats. I'm a health scientist at the University of Texas Health Sciences Center, San Antonio, and I just happen to be a caregiver. So, thank you. That I can tell you didn't come easy. So my husband was wounded June 29th, 2009 in Nasiriyah, Iraq, as a result of an explosion. I was in my first semester of my first year of a doctoral program. I remember people saying, hey, you know, how are you gonna be able to juggle between being a student, a doctoral student with all the responsibilities that comes with it, and then having a veteran, or in that case, he was an active duty soldier, how are you gonna be able to take care of your husband, plus keep your job? So that was very, very challenging. I cannot tell you how much sleep I lost, how much coffee I drank, and how much chocolate, as you can see, I ate. I can tell you that caregivers, we need a different set of support, but I'll just stick to our story. My husband sustained a moderate brain injury with a couple of bleedings in his brain. He was transported through Landstuhl Army Medical Center, and he ended up coming home for continuous rehab. So he was in full-time rehab for 3 years. And what I did is I would drop him off at 8, pick him up at 5, do a lot of conference calls, go at school in the evenings. Sometimes I have school during the day too. So I always have to work with not only the rehab center, but my university, my congressman, everybody together. That doesn't come very easily for all caregivers. So anyway, 3 years Victor received rehab for his brain injury and many other disabilities that he still have. But our case is a little bit different because I went from being a full-time caregiver with all of these amazing and I don't want to call it horrible, but they were very challenging responsibilities to now be a minimal time caregiver. Why? Because my husband, we are 7 years out, he has been able to achieve an amazing level of independence. And that's what we want to aim. We want to have the support of the community and the support of different entities to be able for the veteran to achieve independence and for us as caregivers to continue our goals and careers. And that's very important. So anyway, that's kind of like my introduction. So I'll be sitting here as an Elizabeth Dole Fellow from Texas, but I'm not gonna let my hat of a health scientist, and I'll be talking to some of the health scientists here later on. And one thing that I wanna mention is that the university precisely hired me, knowing that I was a caregiver. They knew they encouraged me to relocate to San Antonio because they wanted a caregiver on board doing health science research at the university through the Military Health Institute. So I'm very proud of that, and we need to mention that. So.
All right, so we'll cross employment off your list of things that keep you up at night. That's great. I'm so happy to hear that. That's exciting. And I do think that marks a change in the landscape. I'd like to start with Jason for our discussion portion. I know you've got a unique experience with case management, specifically the challenge when there's not any. So I'm hoping you could speak a little bit to the value of that, specifically in having a professional kind of backstop on board helping out with your family.
Like I alluded to earlier, is that on? Our journey's been a long one. I'm not a medical, whatever she is.
Yes, you are.
At 21 years old, I started my own business. I hit things with a hammer for a living. I'm a general contractor. Starting my own business was the only way that I could meet Alexis's needs, meet the needs of my children, control my own schedule, and still try to put food on the table. On top of that, coordinating her healthcare. I am not a medical professional, so I'm spending my free time educating on myself on her specific needs. I'm far from an expert on anyone else's, but I know exactly what she needs because I've had to put the time in to learn what she needs. That wears on you. When you're newly married and you've got a couple of really young kids and hours a day are spent researching, learning, and back then when you're talking about 2000, 2001, the VA process, the communication between patients and doctors, even the willingness to interact with a caregiver on the patient's behalf was very, very different than it is now. But the climate was nothing like what it is now. People were reluctant to allow me to handle her care. If she was in the room right now, you wouldn't know that she needs the things that she needs. So it wears on you. The difference between care at different facilities was equally a problem. So after 15 years, to get to the point, after 15 years, I decided to close up the business and relocate from Connecticut to the Boston area. We had switched her primary health care there. I felt like I had a good relationship for the first time at a women's clinic that was welcoming my presence, that was welcoming my input, and that I could truly interact with. So we stopped commuting back and forth, got rid of the business. I forewent the money that I was making in favor of going to work for the government. So I I work for the Air Force now, doing the same type of work, and they're amazing. It's allowed me more free time to be present for my kids, to be present for her, but personally, having to be her case manager for all those years, there were just certain things as an individual that were not available to me anymore, that I didn't feel were attainable. I don't want to say stuck, because it's a privilege and an honor, and I wouldn't have it any other way than to be with her. She's an amazing mother and an amazing wife. So I hate to say that, because I don't want it to come off as I felt stuck by the system. But that's the reality, is I have to put food on the table and raise the kids. Once we made the decision to put her health care first and we relocated, I took the financial hit. I'm more present for my children. It's allowed me more time for self-care, doing some of the personal things that interest me again. And I got to a fairly decent place. But case management, effective case management, and this is not exclusive to pre-9/11 versus post. Effective case management is something that a lot of people in this room probably just think we have, and we don't. About 4 months ago is the first time that I was ever offered a case manager to help me coordinate her care. Any communication that I had, My Healthy Vet, it's a beautiful thing compared to what we had in 2000. But it's cumbersome and it's slow. The ability to call a clinic and say, can I talk to Dr. So-and-so, and have them call you back in a few minutes? I've built those relationships because of my persistence and my we'll call it persistence. So I have built those relationships, but not every veteran has a caregiver that's willing to do that. Not every veteran has a caregiver that can navigate the process and teach themselves how to navigate the process. So just 4 months ago, the polytrauma team, rehab medicine at the Boston VA, they introduced me to my VA wife. She's Alexis's case manager, and I can't even begin to explain how much of a burden it's taken off of me. The things that I worried about at night, the amount of time it's given me back in my day. Thank God I have such a tolerant employer who puts up with the things I have to deal with, the spontaneous days off and all that. But it's the first time that when there's a problem, I have a single source that has pulled together her team, which Alexis is a TBI, among other things. So with every TBI, it's a complex care team. This is the first time in 16 years that I can say we have a team that's coordinated by a single source that I can contact. When I have a problem, I was emailing her before when I was sitting in the corners. My apologies to the guy I wasn't listening to. But I can email her, and within 5-10 minutes, there's a phone call, there's an email, there's a text message, when there's a positive test result, I don't have to tell somebody, go check the test results and let me know what it says. Before I even have a chance to go on the blue button and look and see what the test is, she's already excited for us that it came back clean or that something was clear. There's a single source person who has pulled together a team that I feel comfortable with, that God forbid if anything happened to me tomorrow, she's not going to move into my house, she's not going to take care of my kids, she's not going to mow my lawn or any of that, but Alexis's care could continue to be seamless. So we could fill in the other gaps. That's the most important gap, that there is no one else in Alexis's life that can fill in. And for it to take 16 years for me to get there could make me really mad. It could make me really sad. But instead, I'm just incredibly grateful that it's here. I'm incredibly grateful that it's available to us. But I am mad and sad that it's not available to everyone. The reason we were able to get that case manager is because of an arbitrary date related to her dates of service. That is, I don't even know what it is or why it is that date, but with care as complex as hers, that's not something that any veteran should have to deal with on their own. I can't imagine how a TBI would have coordinated their own care for all those years. Because at the end of the day, that's what this is all about. Her care and her recovery was absolutely stunted by my inability to be more medical, more diligent, better. And I can only imagine how quickly she would have gotten to where she is now had I had that ally on the inside that could cut through all the crap for me. So I want to just try to help be that voice and encourage you all to do everything you can to be supportive employers, to be advocates for the caregivers in your life, and to get some more male caregivers to self-identify. My ultimate goal, I got one more thing. So it's a, and then I'll let someone else talk. It's a double-edged sword, but someday I want to come to an event like this and have to wait in line at the bathroom.
All right. Thanks, Jason. So a couple of things stand out to me from your experience. I think the value and the importance of having the caregiver as an integral part of the team. There's nothing more frustrating than calling a provider who says, I can't talk to you about that. That's not a long-term plan, but that is something that we still deal with, are making progress. But there's a validation, because then you have a frustrated caregiver who says, my contribution isn't important, maybe I don't matter here, and that's a long-term problem. And apparently you have a mic problem. And the other thing is the importance of case management across teams. I've seen it, we're moving, so we're here in DC now, we're moving to Texas, getting out of the Army, so active duty to VA, crossing state lines, there's a lot that goes into that, and I think I was talking to 6 people for about 6 months, and they're like, well, I can't talk to them about that. I don't know what to tell you about that.
And then you don't even get into the Health Net Choice program aspect of it.
I'm not there yet.
And their reciprocation of the process, but we'll get to that later.
So I think caregiver validation, inclusion, and then working across teams is really key from there. So we've talked about the case management part of caregiving. I know sometimes when we hear about a caregiver, you think kind of Florence Nightingale, wound dressing, medication dispensing perhaps. But Annie, I think you have kind of a unique lens into some financial legal that sometimes gets overlooked, but is so, so important. So could you share a little bit about that?
Well, as a parent, of course, and having a single vet who's never been married, doesn't have children that we know about, and just joking. But with that said, as a parent, what we really are looking at, our son's TBI affected the frontal part of his lobe and the frontal lobe and the parietal area. So he has impulsivity, he has hypersexuality, and he also has memory loss. So with all of that said, people say, was he impulsive before? Absolutely. He was an Army Ranger. He was my wild child. But with those types of injuries and the fact that they actually cut away part of the front lobe of his brain, it's just become 100-fold worse. Now, is he competent? That man can sit down and have a conversation with you. He's got a sense of humor that no matter how big the bomb was or how bad the enemy, never going to take that from him. He laughs, he jokes, he doesn't give up. And so our primary concern with him is that he has been a very fortunate one that was recognized for his sacrifices and, like many others, received his settlement from the government. We sat down with him after, he was in a coma for 4 months, but when it was the appropriate time, sat down, talked with him about his finances, explained what he had, and then called in financial advisors so that those monies would be invested. That was great. However, I'm here to tell you there are a lot of predators out there for these young men and women. And in 7 years, because of my son's personality and hypersexuality, I have come up against numerous ones. But I can be really scary, and and I really vet them out.
So you're looking at protecting him financially, legally. You're thinking about whose name is on a deed on a house.
Yes.
You're talking to a financial counselor about who has the power to sign checks.
Exactly. We protect Corey, sometimes what we say, from himself, but his home is in his name and a nonprofit's name. No one else can ever put their name on that home. And in a few years' time, even the nonprofit will remove their name. But we don't put our name on the home. And even if he got married tomorrow, she could never have her name on the home. So things like this, you know, we have to, I'm very good about just speaking out front about what the expectations are when he meets a young woman. And I'm very upfront and very candid and very blunt at times when necessary. And beyond that, I just look at it like we do have to protect them. Technology is great, and my son is cognitive so that he is able to go on all the technologies, and he's got them like this. But those are all the internet, all the dating sites, all the places that, no, I want him to go, but it's a reality. And when you have a TBI patient, if you don't keep them engaged, they can become very secluded and really get out of hand in that way. So we're trying to keep him out of trouble. I don't know what'll happen when we're gone, though. So
that is a concern. I know the long-term trust, I think we had some Wounded Warrior Project people here have done some looking into that. When I was at Quality of Life Foundation, we had a very draft kind of working tool called a contingency care plan that looked at kind of a day-to-day as well as a long-term. Who will step into this role? What does that look like? So I know that's your experience with Corey, but I believe you have some personal financial concerns that I think kind of fly under the radar. If you could move into that just briefly.
Well, my background was in staffing. I had 22 plus years with a major global staffing company. I held a lot of different positions. And when, of course, my son was severely injured, critically injured, and I stepped up to be his caregiver, I had to give the job up. I lived apart from my husband. But my lost wages over the years, I will not be able to recoup those. That will impact my Social Security. And by the way, I am 65. I'm the oldest person on this stage. So, but it will impact my Social Security, and there's nothing I can do about it. My company was very, very good in that they let me come back to work for a while. I actually became a ninja. And so I was able to work a little bit longer, but the needs of my son and then my own health issues just brought it to a halt. Sure. So I was really happy to become a Dole Fellow, and I am from the state of Arizona, by the way. And I was very happy because this has given me something that I can focus on, that I draw a great deal of satisfaction from. But our congressmen, our senators, our government needs to be looking at the Social Security impact for parents.
I think certainly appropriate at congressional level, and also financial advisors and financial planners out there. I know this was kind of new to me. Everyone assumes the lost wages, you lose the salary that you would have earned during the time, but I never thought long-term Social Security. So Mary, I know you've got some insights, a little bit kind of a flip here, a different situation. You're trying to think about your financial future separate from your veteran. What does that look like, and what are your concerns?
Right, so I think about both of them in a way, really.
Sure.
So with ALS, You know, it's a catastrophic disease on so, now I'm gonna cry, Jason. It's catastrophic on so many levels, and you know, the emotional, the physical, and the financial part of it. So I, of course, worry about my future. I teach online, which is great. I kind of figured that out along the way. I no longer contribute to my state retirement system because I'm a contract employee. So that's a hit for me, it's an impact. I'll never recover that. We save voraciously so that we're prepared. I'm prepared for the day that I will be alone. But I don't think that we'll get all the care that we need from the VA if he chooses to take his ALS down a different route. So that would be something like be on ventilation for the rest of his life. And that's very expensive. And I don't think that we get all the skilled care, and I don't have all the answers. I don't have a case manager, Jason. I really would like one, actually.
Or you know somebody.
Will you? It's such a complicated disease. It affects every part of their body. I don't know how many of you in this room know somebody who has ALS. It's complicated, it's sad, it's difficult. And so where do I go if my guy, who I love so much, says to me, yes, this is what I want to do, I'm going to give it to him. But then what does the end mean for me? So that's something we talk about all the time. I think on a monthly basis we go through our finances.
I have to tell you, I think that's so impressive to think that far down the road. I know when I was at Quality of Life, I was shocked. I thought I'd seen it all. I survived the hospital. I survived a cross-country move. No one will shock me. False. The first day I got a call from a caregiver who said, I used to be a caregiver, but my veteran died, and now all of my income is turned off. This never occurred to me. VA compensation, any kind of caregiver stipend, SSDI, all tied to the veteran. I've done no planning. I have no savings, and I need to make my mortgage. And that's terrifying. So I think it's so impressive that you've thought so far ahead and you have kind of this vision. I think that's something that you should get like billboards so you can tell everyone.
I think that they really, our caregivers with ALS, they really worry about that. Where do they go from here? And we can't, you know, we sort of go from independence to dependence. We work backwards, where so many of our caregivers in this program and that we know, you know, the focus is to go forward and to be independent, right? And that's what we had for so many years when he had his cognitive disability, is how do we live with this? But now we're saying, well, how do we live with this disease that we know is killing him? And what does the end look like? And did I get it right? That's a really big question
That is
for me.
stressful.
Did I get
That
it
is
right
stressful.
for him?
Well,
yeah,
thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's just really valuable, and I know it was new information to me. Roxana, I have not forgotten you. We've talked a lot about financial and legal implications. I know you have some ideas and concerns about physical health and other impacts on caregivers. Could you share some of that with us?
So one of my most worry, and this is basically on anecdotal evidence. I have a lot of friends, 28-year-old calling me, she had a heart attack. A 32-year-old with arthritis, a 35-year-old with celiac disease. That is not common. That is not normal in the civilian community. So being involved with this family, because for me, caregivers, they're my family. This is all what I'm surrounded these days. And it just, I remember again with my cup of coffee, I love coffee, having some reflection, and I said, okay, by the time I am Annie's age, I have been caregiving for 32 years. The toll of the role and responsibilities for 32 years, how I'm gonna look like in health-wise when I'm 65. Then the question is, if I'm not gonna be able to care for my husband at the same age, he will be 66. With a traumatic brain injury, that right now we're happy in some way because he reached independence and plateau, but he may get worse, and we know that he will. The question is when that starts getting worse. And it's not like he's perfect. I mean, he has a lot of different disabilities, but we're able to manage those disabilities in my schedule and everything. It doesn't mean that I'm not doing the work or anything, or I'm not a caregiver. It means that I've been able to be functional in a workplace with a lot of different benefits to be able to do all at the same time. And I love what I do, but for how long I'm gonna be able to do that? Right now I have my full-time job, but I have a very amazing colleague. She's a Gold Star wife. She's my best friend. She works with me. We reflect a lot over coffee and tea. And it's not until like a couple months ago she said, Roxana, what do you fear the most? I mean, you're always so smiling. I'm always smiling, sorry. But, you're always so strong. And I've never seen you, like I have this question, I'm sorry if I'm asking this, what burdens you? You know, what do you fear the most? And I say, I fear the most not being able to be there for Victor as strong as I should when he ages and how I'm gonna be aging. In our case, we don't have kids. We've been married for 16 years, but we decided not to have kids. But then I think about those caregivers that they have children. Are those children the caregivers we're seeing now? Are those children 20 years later caring for both parents? And how is that gonna affect their financial, their work, their careers, their schooling? So you see what I mean? It's like a new trend, a new social epidemiology problem. We have this new generation that for the first time is facing cluster of diseases like TBI, PTSD, seizures, epilepsy, chronic pain, opioid use. You have this cluster of conditions that have never been seen before and studied before, but we don't know what is ahead. How is this gonna affect 20 years from now? So that's what I worry the most. I worry about the health of our caregivers. How is that the implication for their children and future generations? And I don't think anybody's, not in a, what I mean is like, I don't think anybody's looking at that at this point, because we have to right now be more reactive in what the problematic is. So my call is to be proactive. And we are, because that's why we're here today. That's why Senator Dole instituted this, to look at like the long term, to start looking at the future. But that's what worries me the most. And that's why I'm so excited that this is basically happening today.
Great, great. Thanks for sharing. I think we are starting to move towards the end of our session, but we did want to give a few minutes for Q&A. So if we have any audience questions for our esteemed panelists, I think we've got Joyce over here, or you can stand on a chair, whatever works for you.
Thank you. Joyce Razor from the National Military Family Association. Thank you for being courageous and sharing your stories with us, because we all need those stories to give power to our advocacy for you and with you, and to help communicate some of these real challenges. I'd like to follow up on the conversation about children. Jason, you said you had kids. How has this journey affected your children? Have they taken on a caregiving role, and what has that meant for your family and how you and your wife interact with them as parents?
You're going right for the jugular to try to make me cry, aren't you? My kids are amazing. They are the most tolerant, accepting, sensitive, caring kids that I've known. I'm biased, but they are. But I do worry. I worry because they're at that age, they're 11 and 13. So they're at an age where I'm starting to have more mature conversations with them. And we firmly believe in parenting together. Sometimes something happens when I'm not around and my wife is wrong. How do I come home and deal with that? That's a very fine line to walk, to not undermine your partner when you know she's wrong. And then to watch your children internalize that and deal with it. It's a very fine line to walk. we are very open with the children's school. They both get good grades. They're both outstanding athletes. They're, I coach one of their field hockey teams. Like they're amazing, well-adjusted children, but that is definitely a fear. Alexis and I have used over the years, and I credit a vet center therapist we met very early on when we first had kids with saving our marriage. There is no support group network for children in our area. We don't live in a very military area, a little south of Boston. Even the school has expressed an interest in maybe we can get something started. Maybe it's not military specific. Maybe it's just disabled parents, and we can get the kids talking about it and having the same sort of dialogue and camaraderie that all of us caregivers are able to have. So that's a good question. We do also pay out of pocket for some mental health services for one of our daughters because we're trying to be as proactive as possible about it. I don't know if that answers the question. I think it shows a gap that, but that's how we deal with it.
Any other questions? Yeah, Justin.
Jason and everyone, thank you so much for sharing your lives with us on the stage. To your point about the lack of diversity among caregivers, on the stage, and you carrying the torch for males in this role.
There's three more here. Where are they?
Yeah.
Let's get a hand.
One.
Stand up, stand up.
Thank you for your bravery, and how can we help you get the word out to more men in your position?
So the question, if anybody couldn't hear, was how can we reach more male caregivers? How can we get the word out? And you said you wanted to recruit male support groups. What does that look like?
I'm not sure what the answer is, but I can tell you about my own misconceptions. I didn't think I would be as well received by this group of women that as I have been. They don't care what my background is, whether I'm a guy or a girl. We deal with the same things, raising kids, and they've become my family too. One of the big hurdles for me was self-identifying as a caregiver. I went to the Independence Fund is here tonight. They sponsored an all male caregivers retreat, and I was pretty much told I had to go. And that's led to some of the best friendships that I have now. That camaraderie, to be able to sit across the table from another guy who understands that and understands what I go through, male specific, is huge. I don't know what the answer to the question is. The only thing that I know that I can do is to sit here and say that this is a welcoming community, male or female, and that my reluctance to approach it and my reluctance to allow it into our lives hampered my self-care, and it hampered my own ability to move forward and kind of get on with life. So I don't know what the answer is, but that's what it did for me.
There we go.
Yeah, so I know that for all of us, our veterans become the priority in our lives. Their health care becomes the #1 priority. When somebody does approach you and ask you, how can I help? I know as a caregiver that you answer, this is how you can help my veteran. But I want to hear, how can somebody in this room approach you as a caregiver and have you answer how they can help you as a caregiver? So how would a nonprofit best come to you and have you not say, this is what you can do for my veteran? I don't know the answer to that because, it's a hard question. But do you have any ideas?
I will tell you, when I was executive director at Quality of Life, it many times took 3 or 4, no, I mean you, not your child, because that's the other one. After the veteran, it's, well, my kids could really benefit from, which is great, Joyce, and hopefully we can continue that conversation. But it did. It took several, like, no, you here on the phone, what do you need? Anybody else have any?
I think sometimes it's so difficult to even assess what we need.
That's true. That's
so
true.
sometimes be more proactive in terms of the question, and thank you, Blair. We love you. I think sometimes coming with a proactive question of, okay, do you have a mortgage? Do you have this? Do you have that? What are do you have respite? What are the injuries that your service member or veteran is going through? And then maybe looking at that, kind of like mapping and seeing, oh, okay, so it may be that so kind of like probing. I would say more probing will be very effective, because even I have gone through that, where I don't know where we need help. And then it's not until the organization probes a little bit, we're like, oh yeah, that would be great, yeah, by the way. So I think using a lot of probing.
Okay, great. Probably one more question.
I have a quick question. Rachel, I liked what you said in the beginning about how overwhelming it was initially when, your world comes crashing down when you get the call. So my question is, what advice would you give to someone who just identifies, who has now found out that they're a caregiver? What advice would you give them?
Remember how when I said everybody's story is different, everybody's experience is different? So that's challenging to try and identify kind of a one-size-fits-all on that. I think to what Roxana said, take the time, if you're able to, depending on the situation, to really look at your family. I know for me, obviously there was not a lot of time. It was a lot of what's right in front of me, and it's really only now, 5 or 6 years later, almost 6, where we kind of have a minute to breathe and say, oh, what do we really want now that we get a choice? What does that look like? So as much as you're able to look for those opportunities to take some time for yourself, kind of meditate might be a scary word, but really put some thought into what's important, where you do want to focus the energy that you have and what you're trying to work towards. I see nodding, so I must be close. We have time for one more?
Rachel, can I?
Yeah.
Okay. Could I say one comment, please? Okay, so before we finish, because then there's questions and then I'm not going to be able to say this. I'm a junior investigator, and I don't know, for those of you who are not in the health science or research arena, research these days, the lag time to translate from the actual research to practice is 17 years, okay? So somebody was celebrating because it went down to 15 years. Today, this afternoon, we're gonna be, the Elizabeth Dole Foundation is gonna be uncovering the roadmap for research. And I'm very, very excited. And I remember talking to some of the staff about it. And not the roadmap, I haven't seen it. I'm very excited to see it. But one thing as a researcher that I would like to see is continuing to change the paradigm in the nation. We don't have 15 years to wait. Annie doesn't have 15 years. I don't have 15 years. None of us have 15 years. Yeah, and one thing that and Jason does. So here you go. The message I want to ask is a call for the researchers in this room that are planning to go forward with research and start implementing all these different studies, to think out of the box and to start thinking about how this research is going to impact, what can we report back to the Elizabeth Dole Foundation so they can translate immediately with other partners. So always think about that. And Senator Dole, that we love her dearly because she's our hero. She's a fierce and ambitious leader. And she sets very high standards because she lives by those standards in her professional life and her personal life. So we as a community, what I would like to say, it's that please, 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 when you leave today as a researcher or as a company that is doing research or going to start allocating some funding in caregiver research, ask that question. How this study is going to impact the community within the next year. Either policy, either is it going to affect policy, is it going to affect existing or new programs, and how this is all going to impact the community parallel. research, action, because we don't have 15 years, okay? Thank you, sorry about that.
Great, no. So, those are great thoughts. I appreciate you sharing. One more. I think we'll catch you later. There will be somewhere over here. I want to thank you so much for your courage and your vulnerability and your willingness to share your story, to make the time to be here. I know that is not easy for all of you, and I would like to tell all of you that this matters, that I appreciate your time and your energy and your effort and what you learn here and what you do when you leave, that it does make a difference. I know without a doubt that the hospital care that I experienced in 2011 and 2012 was worlds away from 2007 and 2008, and that is because people put in time to learn and create new plans. So thank you for that. And with that, I think we're gonna head off to this side. And we go this way. I've been misled.
These are the folks, this is why we're here. Thank you. Appreciate your action and courage. Thank you.